It's very interesting to see where we're at when it comes to the console war, because instead of trying to gaslight people into thinking modern consoles are doing better than Nintendo, they're not. Like, instead, they're trying to go back to the past and create this alternate reality where, like, PlayStation destroyed the N64 and nobody played it and nobody liked any of the games on it. Like, the N64 was a complete joke. And they're trying to say this to people who grew up with the N64, who remember it quite well and still play theirs today. You know, I still play mine today. Like, this idea that these people have that the N64 was a failure is just completely devoid of reality. Because obviously games like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time became major hits. You know, Smash Bros became the tentpole IP for Nintendo. You know, you got like all these cult classics like F-Zero X, Pokemon Snap, you know, like Diddy Kong Racing. Like, you had all these like banger games that I know people still play today. But then you have like the weird caveat things, the things that like nobody really wants to address or talk about for obvious reasons. Like, you know, say GoldenEye versus Metal Gear Solid. Okay, gee, I wonder what's better, the best first-person shooter ever produced or some cinematically driven slop by a hack Japanese man. Okay, like it's so interesting looking back at like the legacy of Metal Gear Solid, because so much of it like hinged on this idea that like, oh, it has a great story, it feels like you're playing a movie and it has so many great characters. And then you have GoldenEye, which first of all had a movie adaptation, which is way better than, well, movie adaptation, the movie it was based on, I should say. The movie came first, obviously. You know, you have this great movie that everybody loved, that was way better than Metal Gear Solid, that stood the test of time, that's still relevant today. The last good Bond movie, a lot of people will argue. GoldenEye was awesome, okay? And then you get the video game, and it's like, wow, you're telling me, like, you know, I am James Bond, I'm completing my mission objectives, I gotta get through these stages, I gotta figure this out, I gotta fight these guys, I gotta fight Xenia, I gotta protect Natalia. I've got to, like, you know, throw Trevelyan off the... It's great. It is fantastic. And then you play Metal Gear Solid, and it's just like, I don't know, just walk through these hallways. Like, it is jarring if you've played both and like, have experience with both and, like, know a lot about both, and you kind of realize that, like, holy fucking shit. GoldenEye is so much better than Metal Gear Solid, it's not even funny. You know, it's like, it's just a stellar first-person game. It has, like, all these great level designs. It has, like, this unique design with, like, these stages that you can play over and over again and get better and better at. You get, like, all these cool weapons, like, all this Bond lore. Like, you have all these things that make GoldenEye, like, one of the greatest games of all time, okay? And then you have MGS, okay? Which is, like, some top-down isometric bullshit. You know, the characters, like, don't even have faces. Like, you're just, like, wandering around, like, in this most basic bitch-like scenario. Shooting sucks. You know, melee combat sucks. Like, it doesn't have any of the, like, gravitas or, like, the appeal that GoldenEye does. Like, it doesn't have the tightly woven level design. It doesn't have anything. That is, like, the problem that a lot of people have with Metal Gear Solid now, is that, like, how dated it is. And then you look at someone like GoldenEye, you look at, like, someone like Darkside Phil playing it, and, like, you know, it all comes rushing back, like, how good GoldenEye actually is. How much better it is than modern FPS games. Like, how it is a true all-time classic. And yet, like, for some inexplicable reason, GoldenEye has been written off for the past 30 years. You know, so many people have tried to come out and say that, like, GoldenEye is dated, or it's not that good, or that, like, it was overhyped, and that, like... the reality is, yes, GoldenEye is better than Doom, it's better than Halo, it's better than Half-Life 2, it's better than, like, I don't know, The Last of Us, BioShock, like Grand Theft Auto 3, 4, San Andreas, and 5... you know, GoldenEye has just kind of proven itself to be, like, a cut above all these other generic, like Western games. I would argue it's probably one of the best Western-produced games ever, okay? This game was, like, a huge monumental success, and yet, for some reason, we don't talk about it. Instead, we do this thing where we just pretend it doesn't exist. And because I think because it so strongly conflicts with the narrative, you know? Like, just like how you don't see people acknowledge that Pokemon was way bigger than Final Fantasy VII. Okay, because that flew in the face of the narrative that, like, Nintendo didn't have any quality RPGs in the 90s, you know? How many times have we heard people scream about, like, N64 doesn't have any RPGs when Pokemon was right there on the Game Boy? Okay, but that's not the same platform, though. Same company, same generation, same ecosystem, okay? Like, you know, Pokemon Stadium was a thing on N64, you know? Again, you know, Pokemon went on to be the biggest brand in the world. And we're supposed to believe that, like, the PlayStation 1 won that generation because of, like, Cloud fucking Tifa under the highway. Like, that didn't happen. Okay? The situation that, the narrative that YouTubers try and sell you, the idea that everyone was playing MGS, that everyone was playing Final Fantasy VII, that is completely untrue. Like, GoldenEye was more popular than all of that. Ocarina of Time was more popular than all of that. Like, Pokemon was bigger than everything. Essentially, like, the online narrative you see, like, regarding the fan fiction that, like, the PlayStation 1 crushed the N64, it's just completely devoid of reality. It is something that we really do have to spell out to everyone. And even if it was true, it wasn't true by the time that the GameCube came out. Okay, where, like, the industry started to change, and, like, Nintendo started putting out, like, more niche JRPGs. Tales of Symphonia was a big game for them. They had, like, you know, Pokemon Coliseum, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Oh, but Bat Kaido's Origins, but that doesn't count because PlayStation 2 has Jak and Daxter. Like, it has so many better games. You know, people were seriously trying to tell you that the PlayStation 3D mascot platformers were better than Nintendo's at the time. And if you played both like I did, you know the idea of that is just laughable. But that was the angle they were going with. And like, that's like the difference, I think, is that, like, with the PS1 era, you know, there was this, like, it was very common for people not to play everything. You know, not to know everything about the industry, not to, like, understand this. And, like, people were, like, gaslit into thinking Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid were way bigger than they actually were. It is not possible to do the same thing for, like, Super Smash Bros. Like, you can't argue that Street Fighter 6 is bigger than Smash Bros. Like, it just makes you look like a retard. Okay? You can't argue that, like, Fire Emblem isn't popular anymore, or that, like, nobody cares about Pikmin. It's just not gonna work, okay? Like, they tried the same tactics, they tried to make them work, and, like, this is the end result, is that people just kind of, like, look at them and go, like, bro, I've played those games, I know what you're talking about, that isn't true. And, like, even if it was true, that doesn't take away the fact that these are genuinely good games. You know, like, that's just the reality of it. Like, the way people present it is as if Nintendo just got completely stopped that generation, but that isn't true. You know, it was Sony paying third parties for exclusivity deals and creating the illusion that these exclusive titles on PlayStation were way better than the competition. Like, that's all there is to it, essentially. Like, in the end, what happened is that Nintendo won by simply producing better games, by putting themselves out there, by continuing to succeed. They kept becoming more and more successful as the industry fell apart. Like, and that is why the Switch 2 has been so radically successful. In spite of, like, the Nintendines of the world doing everything they possibly can to downplay this company.